as soon as I stepped into that space, I just felt like I was no longer at the top of the food chain. And that's when I just started to notice it's really, really quiet out here.
Yeah, everything got quiet at the same moment.
And then that's when I heard what at first I thought was two sticks being knocked against each other. It was just and then I saw movement and heard a reply, another knock, knock. Then one more time over to the left, I saw movement and another knock, knock. I was really freaked out by that, didn't know what to do about it. Then the movement starts moving towards me.
I took a few steps into the path, into the woods, and I put my hand on my knife that was on my side. And the moment that I put my hand on my side, they took notice of me. This is something that Chris and I experienced together back in May of 2019.
Okay.
And it's not something that we talk about to a lot of people, and more recently have. And I think that why are we talking about this more now, Chris?
I wanted to get rid of like the shame and the stigma. I wanted to shed that and not feel like I couldn't talk about it because people would, think I was crazy for what I experienced. So,
yeah, and I'm the same boat too, I guess, of caring a little bit less about what people think about things they may not believe. I trust other people's faith when it doesn't jive with my experience. So maybe people listening to this will feel like, oh, I've had something similar happen, or, oh, this could happen to other people. So we met in 2016 through a group of friends who spent a lot of time in the wilderness together, really people that were trying to get more comfortable camping off the campground, just being able to go out and hike and find a place off trail and set up and feel like you have the skill set to take care of yourself for a few days off trail.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how we met, through hanging out with a common group of friends who all had this interest, got really into like bushcraft and stuff like that, right? So this was May 2019. We had gotten together with a group of friends for the weekend. We were practicing bushcraft, and we had spent, Chris and I with a few other people, most of the morning of that day practicing like stalking. We were barefoot in the woods, just really trying to go quietly and see how well could we get through the woods without disturbing animals. And we were also practicing throwing skills. We were using throwing sticks. I don't know if we were doing slingshots then or not, but we had recently, I'd had the experience of catching and processing and eating a rabbit. And it was one of the most delicious and rewarding things. And we were about learning to use the whole animal. It wasn't gratuitous, but it was a thing that I had chosen to experience. And Chris and I were talking about through this morning and early afternoon of stalking and throwing sticks that we kind of wanted to go out and see if we could get ourselves a rabbit for dinner. And so we were out in the wilderness. Now this is out in Mount Hood National Forest in Oregon. It's probably about as specific location as we'll get.
Sure.
So another friend of ours was there and was like, hey, I was out here last week. I know where there's a ton of rabbits. They're down by the willows and thickets, and I can show you where I saw some rabbit runs, right? And so we're like, cool, let's go. So this is probably 4, almost 5 o'clock in the afternoon, like late afternoon, almost going to be early evening. And yeah, so we were heading out in the woods. Chris, what happened when we got out there looking for rabbit?
Well, we went out, looking for rabbits. I really wanted, I hadn't had what Ken described as, looking for rabbits, trying to up my skills. So I was really attached to that. And we went out through an area with a lot of blackberry bushes, surrounded by a small wooded area and a clearing. And once we got out there, we were with our friend, and he was like, all right, well, let's have someone stay put in the center or outside of the woods, and then 2 people go around this wooded area and kind of push the rabbits out and see if one of us can get a rabbit. So that's kind of where we were at when I was just stalking in the middle on the outsides of the field, kind of waiting quietly, just trying to be as quiet as possible because I just really wanted a rabbit.
And Chris was perched like right at the opening of a rabbit run with a throwing stick, and our friend and I had gone opposite directions around the edges just to try to rustle up some rabbits to send them running out the run so Chris could capture one. So this was like our whole intent was to help Chris get this rabbit and we could get it for dinner. So you stayed put.
I stayed put.
And you were right there at the edge of what we're going to call the willows. It's just a very thick area with maybe a U-shaped path that goes through it. It has lots of twists and turns. But, Chris, you were saying there's all those blackberry thickets too. So it's really dense with some paths through. And as I was trying to get around the north end of this thicket, my path quickly ran out. So there was just nowhere for me to go to try to scare up rabbits. So I came back to this U-shaped trail that goes into the middle of the thicket. And I'm walking on the trail and I'm going super quiet. We're barefoot out there. And I'm trying to see if I can sense any rabbit evidence of any small game. And I get to the middle of this thicket and there's this like clearing in the middle of it. And I'd never been in there before, but there's this clearing in the middle of it. So I step into this clearing surrounded by this thicket, and immediately the hair on the back of my neck, just like every hair on my body stood up, honestly. It does right now if I think about it. Like, so there was just fear in the air as soon as I got into the clearing, and I hadn't seen anything, but I felt it for sure. And I felt like I've heard people say prey feels when it's being watched.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and we're in the woods and it's spring, so it's easy. Elk, mama bear, there could be anything out there, right?
Sure,
like we're not dumb. But we're also careful, and I hadn't seen any evidence. There were elk tracks in the area, and this was a known area for, there's some migration happening just where the lay of the land was. But I turned around in this clearing, and I'm going to say, I'm usually a bad judge of distance. I'm going to say 20 to 25 feet away from me on the ground is what looks like a little, like a short lean-to built with sticks, and under it, some kind of creature is in it. And I say creature because I could not identify what kind of animal it was. And all I could really see were the eyes on it. And the eyes were round, they were gold, they did not have whites. It was like gold and brown. It was very dark. From what I could see there, the eyes that I could see looked too big for an animal that would be able to fit under this small shelter that I saw it in. Like something about the proportion of the eyes I could see did not fit with the size of the space that it was in. And what I was getting at from like the feeling I was getting was that it was scared and I was in danger. And I had to go past it in order to get to the trail to leave the woods, but I kind of gave it a wide berth and I kept walking down the trail back to exit the thicket. So, at this point I've seen something, it seemed scared, it scared me. But this is to be expected where we are and what we're doing. And I got back out to where Chris was hanging out by the rabbit run. And at that point, our other friend also kind of started coming back. So we reconvened there for just a second. I didn't say anything. Like I saw something. It didn't seem like so wild to me that it was something I was going to mention, because we see things like that sometimes. And I didn't know Chris very well at the time. We'd known each other in this group for a year and a half, but yeah, we didn't really know each other at the time. And so then we switched roles, right? We switched roles.
I didn't see any rabbits, so I was still hungry for them. And we decided, Ken immediately was like, I'm going to stay here in the center. And I was like, all right. So Ken stayed out right by the rabbit run, and our friend and I, we did exactly the same route again. I took the route that Ken did up through the middle of this thicket, and it was a really, really slow amount of time that I took to go back into that area. I was stalking. I was just being as quiet as a mouse, as quiet as possible, and I finally made my way through the twists and turns and made my way to the center of the clearing. And as soon as I stepped into that space, I just felt like I was no longer at the top of the food chain. And that's the only way I can describe it. I was in danger. I felt really scared. But at that point, I was still feeling, new to being in the woods with no one around me. So I kind of brushed it off, and I was like, yeah, I'm just being paranoid. Like, we're fine. There's nothing out here. Like, if there was something out here, somebody would have saw it. Somebody would have said something. So I sat and waited. Nothing happened. So I just kind of pushed into the other side of that clearing because there was a large stump. And I wanted to stand on that stump and have a good scene and look around at the area, because I could really, it was kind of like the top of a hill in a way where I could see all around me really well. And that's when I just started to notice, it's really, really quiet out here.
Yeah, everything got quiet at the same moment. Like every bug, every bird, every background sound, even in the road in the distance, got quiet.
I mean, it's the wilderness. I thought this is really strange. There's not any bird song at all. There's constant noise. And then that's when I heard what at first I thought was two sticks being knocked against each other. It was just and then I saw movement and heard a reply, another knock, knock. And then one more time over to the left, I saw movement and another knock, knock. And by that point, I was like, I'm thinking faster than I can speak at this point, but it was, a woodpecker is over there. Wait, that's not what a woodpecker sounds like. Wait, why is there a reply 50 feet away over in this corner? And by that time, another round had happened where it was knock, knock over here, knock, knock over here. And then by that point, I had seen where the knocking was coming from. There was like just slight movement in the bushes. And this is blackberry briars that are taller than me, 7 feet up, and they're just wild, right? So I was really freaked out by that, didn't know what to do about it, and then the movement starts moving towards me. I could see clearly through the brush. It was coming towards me, and everything in me said, get out of there. So I hightailed it, ran back down. It was a curvy path through that thicket, and I sprinted, ran down that path because it really freaked me out. But right at the edge of the end of the trail, I kind of stopped and checked in with myself, and I'm like, you didn't see anything, I didn't hear a sound behind me chasing me. I kind of just stopped and was like, I don't want to freak out in front of my new friend here. But then at that moment, once I stopped and took my breath, right, just directly behind my left ear was the deepest guttural growl right behind me. And I turned halfway around and there was nothing there, but that growl sent me out. I looked just enough to see there was nothing behind me, and then I ran out of that trail and ran up to the kin.
And you didn't really say anything.
I didn't say anything. You saw and you were like, "Are you okay?" Because I know I probably looked wild in the eyes or something, because I was so scared at that moment.
You looked shaken, but you didn't say anything. And our other friend had not come back yet. And meanwhile, while Chris is in there hearing this and kind of getting scared, I'm also hearing that same tapping communication, but I'm outside the thicket because I'm the one watching for rabbits to run out. But I also can see at the same time the movement in the high thicket and hear where the tapping's coming from. And then saw Chris come out looking concerned, but not saying anything. So neither of us at this point has said anything. Chris takes the spot right next to the rabbit run again, and I take a spot maybe 25 yards behind Chris.
Yeah, I said, let's just wait for our friend to come back. Like, maybe he'll know something about it. He had more experience. Like, let's just wait and see what happens. I need to calm myself down and just kind of sit.
So we were waiting for a while. Still, everything's quiet. Our friend hasn't come back. I don't know how long we were there. I always say it was like 45 minutes. Chris says I'm thinking that's a lot longer. Like, that's a lot less time than that. So somewhere less than that. I noticed Chris visibly agitated. We've been sitting quietly for a while. I'm 25 yards behind them. They're by the tree line. I'm kind of in safety zone. And Chris looks agitated because I guess you heard, it sounded like something coming up on you, right?
I silly had my back to where I had just been run out, and I just felt something was behind me still. I kept hearing something, just a whisper, just absolutely nothing for me to be enough to like stand up and go and look. I just kept turning around
and that's what I saw. I just saw you kept looking behind you, like something was there. And so my instinct was I like did a wide flank. So Chris is there getting agitated. We've heard this knocking. We've seen some stuff moving in the brushes. We both had something weird happen inside the willows, but hadn't talked about it. I take this wide flank down to the other end of the U trail, but basically I'm triangulating in my sight where Chris is on the outside of the thicket and into the thicket in the area where where Chris is sensing this movement. And this is about dusk now. And I'm looking, and it's like I'm looking through trees and the light's not full, but there's a lot of trees and it's spring. So not all the growth is in, but some of it's in. But I'm looking through layers of vertical branches and like some thicket. And it looks to me like there's a big animal out there for sure, and it's moving towards Chris, but it's still at the moment. And I can see a little bit of it around the side of one tree, and I can see a little above it of around another tree, but it shouldn't, like the distance was too big to be an animal that could be like partially obstructed by these two trees and where they were to each other. But I was like, must be a huge freaking elk. Because as one of the parts of it moved, the other one moved at the exact same time. And I could still see these two parts of what I thought was the same large animal moving behind the trees. And then as it moved, and it was not one, it was two, and it was moving. It was like two animals moving in sync with each other from like almost like tree to tree, moving towards Chris a little at a time, and not moving with any kind of like gait that you could see. And so there's Chris is pulling up a picture because I sketched it when, shortly after this happened, we wrote it all down and sketched it. So Chris just pulled up an image I sketched. But that's when I saw two things moving. They were standing upright. I could clearly see that it was two creatures. I'm guessing they were 7 feet tall, but they were kind of hunched over. They were absolutely they looked like as if you were people hiding in the woods. They were visible around the edge of the tree and then would move at the same time, but they didn't move like walking or running or jumping. They moved like sliding. So I couldn't tell exactly what it was, but I took a few steps into the path, into the woods, and I put my hand on my knife that was on my side. And the moment that I put my hand on my side, they took notice of me. And they looked at me, but like their bodies turned and faced me. It was like they spun or something. I don't know how to say it. They just turned towards me. I had my hand on my knife, and they faded away. They slid backwards and sort of just disappeared into the dark amongst the trees and the willows and everything. Like, I saw them clearly. The next picture I drew is your stereotypical Sasquatch outline. Like, you saw that. I had no doubt, and I had no experience with this, but I was like, I think I just saw big feet. There was two of them. But they went away, and I was freaked out. and also like I'm losing my mind. Came back out. We'd been there for a while. No rabbits. I didn't say anything to Chris. But yeah, so we were like, well, what happened to our friend? Chris called. We had cell reception out there. And we found out that he had gotten a call. He had to go back into town. Like he left. So at the point the last time we had seen him, he was walking to scare some rabbits for us and then got a text or a call and he left. So he was back in town. So we went through our evening. We didn't talk about it at all. We went through dinner. We had a campfire with everybody. And I think we were cleaning up after campfire and we found ourselves alone together by that little table. And you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, we came back to camp just quickly with no words. It's pretty strange for us. I'm a friendly person. I talk a lot. But we really, neither of us talked on the way back through camp.
It was a quiet dinner.
It was a very quiet dinner. Afterwards, Ken came up to me and was like, so what happened? I saw you ran out the end of the trail. What happened? What did you experience? And I told him everything I just told you. And then he started saying, well, what was behind you? You know, what was there?
I didn't say anything about what I had experienced. You were just telling me your half.
And then kept pushing me. Well, if you had to put a name to what you thought happened, what you thought was there behind you, what would you put a name to it? And he just kept pushing and kept pushing. I didn't want to say it because I felt crazy, you know? And finally I just said it. I said, I think the only thing I think that it could have been was a Sasquatch. I don't know.
Never been more relieved to hear somebody say something they thought was crazy. Because that's exactly, I mean, when I saw what I saw, I was like, I have no doubt that's what that is. And I want to say too, like, I'm telling you about how they were gliding. We're telling you about the knocks and stuff, but I'm in my late 40s. Before this, I knew I'd heard of Sasquatch, Yeti, Bigfoot, you know, like Harry and the Hendersons, but I didn't know anything about like details of Sasquatch. It wasn't something I was into. But when it got silent out there, when the tapping was going on, whatever I saw with eyes, I don't know if that was or wasn't related. But then when I saw the two of them standing there and they pulled my knife and they spun around and looked at me and left, like, I have no doubt that's what it was. And so then as we started learning more and just talking about it more, and we immediately, like within days, wrote down our experience and we're sketching and we have a map of the place and stuff. And we have been back a few times to just respectfully check it out, not to try to like be on a hunt or a lookout again, but just kind of, we feel like something special happened and we don't know why, and we don't know why we were in that place at that time, but it was pretty formative in the sense of, you know, opening both of us up differently into things that we believe are possible, just based on that experience. And I know that's what faith is for most people. And I think it means different things for both of us, but it definitely also like cemented our, you know, friendship now over these last 6 years since then.
Yeah.
And just recently, we've been talking about it more and having a little more of a, you know what, there's other people who have experienced things like us. They might like to hear that other people do too. And, you know, share a story with people who are interested and might have some thoughts about it and feel, like you said earlier, Chris, less like shame for somebody thinking you're crazy because you had an experience or have a belief that they can't understand. And that's kind of BS. So we thought we'd call you up and talk about it. I don't know what to do with that, Matt, but
yeah. The first thing that comes to mind, both sides, the podcaster side and the old researcher side in me, this story, your experiences are a really big deal. There's a lot of information to unpack, especially experiencing all these things and not knowing that these are commonly reported traits of Bigfoot.
Chris sent me a podcast shortly after. I don't remember which one, but I listened, and the first story I listened to, I was just like, holy crap, like they couldn't have described more perfectly. And I'm putting words to it now that I got from other people afterwards, talking about their gait. I wouldn't have thought of it that way, but they slid, they floated, They faded. It wasn't walking. Or if it was walking, it had a different kind of skeletal system than us. I don't know.
Where do I even begin? I mean, the possibility that you saw a small one under a structure.
I'm so conflicted about. That's the thing that I have, like, not second guess myself about, but I have been back to that spot so many times to try to unpack that. Because yeah, all right, can I just tell you what I've rationalized it to be?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And this might get convoluted, so you cut me off. But Chris you've been out to this area before. Mm-hmm. I was new there. You'd been out there before. I had never seen the clearing, but you had. Mm-hmm. And you had pictures of the clearing mm-hmm. from photos you'd taken with other people mm-hmm. from some months before. Okay. You know where I'm going with that. Mm-hmm. Is that okay? Can I talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I saw whatever it was underneath, the structure that it was under was like the size of maybe a coffee table, right? It was like a lean-to that was a coffee table height. So when I saw the eyes and what would have been the shape of the head of what was under there, it was more to me like somebody was standing in a 7-foot deep hole poking their head out of it.
Okay.
Then there was something small crouched there. That's how, as I played that back in my mind over the next like 72 hours and went back there, that's what it didn't seem like something small curled up, or it was small with really big eyes. It just didn't seem proportionally right that it could be something small, unless, I've heard since that people think Sasquatch are shapeshifters. Maybe it transformed its shape. I don't know, but that is a piece it emanated, like, it stared hard. It emanated fear and danger. And like, I've never had the hair on my body stand up like that.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Could it have been laying down and just from your angle, all you could see was the head?
Absolutely. I've never thought of it like that. It could have been laying on its stomach, looking up. It could have been laying on its side with its head. Yeah. I've never thought of it that way, but yeah, it absolutely could have. And here's the other weird thing. The reason I brought up the photos that Chris had from months before, the next morning we went out there with a few other people just to walk out, and we wanted to check out the scene. And that little structure was like gone. It was thrown off into the bushes like it had been strewn there forever. Like, there was no evidence that it had been constructed where I had seen it the day before. And sometime after this, some weeks or months after this, Chris came across the photos from being there months before and had a photo with that structure where I saw it, the size that it was. And that was back in it was in the winter. We were doing this in May, and it was sometime in maybe January, February. You had that picture from?
No, it was from like October.
October. Okay. Anyway, the shelter had been there that little shelter had been there for a long time. But the morning after, when we went back, it had been kicked off into the brush and totally dismantled.
You guys are out there, for lack of better terms, practicing bushcraft, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
So I would assume that whenever you say you saw a lean-to or a structure, you saw something that something built, and it wasn't just like a pile of brush.
Absolutely. It was constructed. It had joints. It was meant to be that.
Was it similar in design to any specific type of bushcraft structure that you know of?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, if it was larger scale, it could be something else. Like, it could, but it was just. It looked like a small lean-to. It looked like a small lean-to. It looked like a shelter for a big cat. It looked like a shelter for a rain shelter for an animal. If I had to say, I would say
it looked like something that held like firewood and kept the rain off of a small stack of firewood.
So maybe somebody put it there to protect firewood if they were camping out there or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, it was definitely constructed. It wasn't a naturally occurring pile of logs or sticks.
And whenever you saw the thing, the eyes,
yeah,
no sort of movement, no sounds, no smells, nothing like that?
No smell, staring straight at me hard, no blinking, fear and danger. That's what it was emanating. I think it was maybe pheromones, but I didn't smell anything.
Yeah, they also specifically, we had an advantage for rabbit hunting because it was a very windy day.
Oh, right.
So I was, when I was like hiking up the trail or, sneaking up the trail, I was moving with the wind. So it was very windy, and that's something I've thought about too, is like we didn't encounter smell, but.
Mm-hmm.
You were rabbit hunting with sticks, and you managed to take a rabbit with a stick. Is that correct?
I have before. We did not that day. We were not successful. We went back, I don't know what, we probably had ramen for dinner. I don't remember.
Well, I just meant in general, because I have been rabbit hunting before with a gun, and it was extremely difficult with a gun. So kudos to you for being able to accomplish that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
The two that you saw creeping, stalking, whatever they were doing.
Yeah.
You talk about them spinning around.
Yeah.
And you were also talking about their movement was more of a glide or a slide as opposed to bouncy steps like humans take.
Right.
And you said that they were moving in unison with one another.
Absolutely. That's what I thought it was an elk. I thought it was an elk at first because I thought I'm seeing the front and back of an elk moving and is obstructed by trees. But that's not what it was.
Whenever you put your hand on the knife and they turn towards you.
Yeah.
Was the movement synchronous?
Yes.
That's so creepy.
It was, and it was the moment I touched my knife. I mean, I didn't pull it out even. I just put my hand on my hip because I was like, I don't know what that is or what's about to happen, but it is definitely moving towards Chris, and I'm over here, and I put my hand on my knife, and they just spun, looked at me, and I stepped backwards, and they faded away backwards. Like that is like, and then we left.
Now, do you mean they disappeared from view, or do you mean they disappeared?
They disappeared. There. I don't know how to.
Like,
I mean,
they're not there anymore. They're not just obscured or hidden. They're gone.
They looked at the same time. It seemed like all of these things were happening. They were gliding backwards. They were getting smaller, and they were moving through the trees, not around them. Like they just faded away, moving backwards and getting smaller, and they were gone and I was gone. Like once I saw them start fading back like that, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like that's when I just stepped out of the woods, and we were like shaking and like, hey, let's see if we can call our friend and let's get the hell out of it. Because we still don't, we're not talking about any of this the whole time till like 4 hours later.
What color were they?
The way I described it before was it seemed more like a black hole than like a furry color. It was like, it was really dark, and it was dusk, and it was in the trees, but they were like dark. Like I've seen a bear in the woods, a black bear in the woods from a distance, and it has that kind of matte finish to it. Like you can kind of tell it's a critter. It had that sense of like, it seemed like fur, but it just looked so dark. And like the silhouette that everybody draws on the bumper stickers and whatnot, like that was pretty accurate.
I remember you said it was the deepest, darkest, blackest black you've ever seen.
Yeah. And as I'm thinking about that, when I saw whatever was under the cover in the clearing was like more brownish to it. Like definitely more like a darker brownish to it. Yeah. So they were super dark.
Were you able to see any like eyes or facial features or anything like that?
I can't describe the facial features, but yes. And I saw them one other time. And the one other time I saw it was at a gas station in Washington. And somebody at this gas station, they had a bunch of local people's art in there, and everybody was doing Sasquatch art. Bunch of magnets and mugs and paintings and things. And I was like, fake, looking at all of them. And then I got to this one and I was like, holy shit, because this one artist had drawn on this magnet, like their features exactly. How can I describe? I don't have a good drawing of that.
You've got the eyes down, but I've asked you before.
You've asked me to retell those features and I can't describe it. But the eyes were perfectly round. When I saw the smaller under that shelter, it was like that golden brown, no whites, just like brown and pupil.
Chris, how did you unpack all of this mentally? I mean, after you got home and everything, processing all the information and everything that happened, like, what were you thinking?
I mean, that was why I wanted to go sit down at the end of the trail. I needed to process and figure out what the heck just happened and why I was growled at, but there was nothing there. Because the fear it instilled in me, it just really affected me. So I think I sat there in shock for a bit, just kind of running over what happened. And at that point, I think I'd seen maybe a stray episode of something on TV. I was a full-blown skeptic at that point, that I believe that, if Sasquatch existed, we would have caught it on a camera. We would have, one would have turned up, and we would have a body. We would have some evidence. I was totally convinced that they didn't exist. And then I had no other explanation. There wasn't an elk. I went home the next day, talked to a friend that had a lot of wilderness skills, and she made me listen to every single growl of every single animal we could think of, and nothing was that deep, nothing was that guttural, nothing came close, honestly. And I was just in shock still for a long time. I had no idea what to think. I was out of options.
Whenever you heard the growl, you mentioned it was behind your ear. Do you mean it was literally behind your ear, like growling into your ear, or just on that side of you, back behind you somewhere?
I didn't feel anything. I wish I could say I felt breath, but it had to be right behind me. It was so close, and my left ear, it was so strong, and nothing on my right side picked up. So I felt like it was just right there behind me.
That's so creepy. That's super creepy. I mean, nobody knows for sure, but what do you think was going on that day whenever you guys encountered this? Why do you think they were doing that, running you out of there, behaving the way they were? Have you formed a story in your minds about what played out that day?
Yeah, my theory is we went out hunting, and they were out hunting as well. I think the area we were in was probably a great funnel for catching an elk. I believe, our two groups were being as quiet as possible, and then we intersected, and I 100% know for certain if they wanted to hurt me, if they wanted to do anything to just take me out, they could have. I feel like we were very obviously pushed out of an area, so maybe they could hunt. Maybe they could get their own dinner. That's what I think.
We have talked this through so many times over the years about like what and why and how, and the whole fact that it is an area, a migratory area near a mountain that you would have a lot of game going through makes sense. Just as it would if these are migratory animals, wherever they're coming from and wherever they're going, maybe this is also a migration path or time for them. And we happen to be in the same place at the same time. I don't know. The way they moved and the way they disappeared, I don't know where they went. I want to know where they went. And then, of course, I've had plenty of now time to talk with folks or listen to different stories I've heard. And, people talk about Sasquatch and other beings being able to live in multiple planes of existence that maybe we can't sense. And so I've thought about that a lot. Like, was it a time of year in spring and a place on the rolling kind of slope of the mountain at a dusky time of day, which is all kinds of transitions, that some kind of veil was just thin enough and they popped through to eat, and so did we? Like, I don't know, but...
I believe Sasquatch are multi-dimensional, and that's how they're able to move. And that's purely from my experience of something being directly behind me, turning around, and there's nothing there. There is no physical way for something to move away that quickly. And given Ken's description, that's my theory.
There's one piece that I it's not like another thing that happened with the Sasquatch, but what I might have done to piss it off. That very first time when you were on the watch and I had gone around the north side and saw like I couldn't get much further, I was throwing pebbles into the willow thicket, into the area that then I was walking into. I could have very easily nicked somebody with a pebble and just kind of like set off that whole irritation. But that was one thing I was doing to them if they were in there, you know.
Nobody knows anything for a fact, which, you know, causes a lot of problems whenever discussing this subject.
Yeah.
Right.
But there are some people out there that believe, and I happen to be one of them. Interestingly enough, the type of hunting that you guys were doing that day, I believe Bigfoot hunt in a very similar fashion. I believe they oftentimes use multiple individuals to flush game into another area where they are ambushed by waiting Bigfoot, which is exactly what you guys were doing.
Wow.
And now you say that you were throwing pebbles, which is another thing that they do.
Oh, is it?
I mean, you guys were out there barefoot behaving like Bigfoot.
Yeah. I definitely didn't realize that. That's just how we were trying to eat dinner.
I mean, I don't know if that played into anything that you experienced that day or not, but it's kind of an interesting note.
I think it does play into it because we were trying to be as quiet as possible. We weren't the typical human, just come stomping in and let me go look at this and let me go see and if there's any sign over here and just stomp through. Okay, there. We were being as quiet as possible.
True. Yeah.
Like as quiet as possible, trying to sneak.
Yeah, and in terms of body language, I mean, you were a predator, and you're not carrying guns, you're not carrying weapons like they would normally see humans used, you know, when hunting like that. So I can see several reasons why that would definitely get their attention and maybe cause them to react the way they did. Without giving too much detail, of course.
Yeah.
How did you guys find this spot exactly?
Yeah. Chris is giving me the don't give away this area. So I'm not going to give him
don't give away the area for sure.
This a group of friends that we had in common had used the space before just for like, you know, group outings and stuff. It was just a place in Mount Hood National Forest that they liked to go. And we just were there and they're like, oh yeah, there was rabbits down here last weekend, right down here.
So is it like just a random place that someone found at some point, or is it like a place that's like a public location that people go to?
It's a place that someone found at some point. And through taking their friends there, we both kind of randomly ended up in that group of friends and came to that spot. Like I know it by GPS coordinates.
The U-shaped trail that leads into the thicket that you're talking about, is that a human trail?
It could have, I mean, definitely there had been people on that trail before, I would say, seemed like game trails. And this was one of those things that like, I didn't know to look for until we went back different times, was many of the game trails. Like if you got off the biggest game trail, they were like blocked with what looked like small trees have been pulled down. It's like an X shape to block your path. I never like thought to look for it, but after I did, we went back and we're like, oh, there's places where it's like, what's down this smaller game trail? And then there's like an X there blocking you. And then we came to respect the fact that we weren't going to go down there.
I mean, I feel like that's been part of this experience is we had all of these things and we noticed all of these things and wrote them down.
And then learned about them.
and then went out and sought other stories and heard these other things, other coincidences. It seemed like that couldn't be coincidences.
What kind of things have you guys found after the fact, going back out there?
Well, that first time we went, we felt like we went deeper. We went during the daytime. It was just the two of us. We went during the daytime, and we were trying to like recreate our steps and see what was going on. And we went further down the trail. Like instead of running out, we went past that clearing. And if you remember, there was a few places where it seemed like, is that a downed tree, or is that a like really rough kind of habitat, like protection? It was, but no human constructed stuff that we found, but just there were some places where it was like the way the bark was leaning, the way the big piece of bark was leaning, the way these couple of things had fallen looked like too conveniently like a place to lay down, but it wasn't like man-made. We tried to see it. We thought we saw a partial footprint, but I think we just wanted to see that, honestly, that next morning.
Yeah, we're not sure about that.
We didn't get a cast of anything, but it was like the place where I feel like they were when they spun to look at me. We went into that area, and that's where I was like, is that a big heel, or is that I think that was just me wanting to see it, really.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's so difficult once you have something like this, whenever you go back into an area or just in the woods in general.
Yeah.
You know, everything starts to stand out as like, oh, this could be a track. Oh, this could be a structure. It's so difficult to kind of, check yourself and not get carried away.
Well, and your brain is designed to see patterns, right? And so then when you want to make things seem logical or fit a narrative that makes you feel less insane, then you're going to see stuff that fits your narrative, which is another reason I think we haven't talked about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know we're talking to you now, and you'll have an episode, and we chose that, but I hate being introduced to a group of people as my friend who has a Sasquatch story, right? Like, I don't tell people. I only tell people if I go camping with them. That's my new thing. If somebody says, "Hey, I heard you've seen a Sasquatch," I'll say, "I'll tell you if we go camping sometime." But it's not a bar story. But I guess it is now. We just told it on podcast.
What kind of reactions have you gotten whenever you've told your friends and family or whoever about this?
I've only told close friends or people I felt like I could trust the story with. And remarkably, I was met with a lot of understanding and belief, honestly. You don't know how many people actually like know somebody that's known somebody or, just believe that they actually exist. I have run into maybe one critic, someone who didn't believe and felt the exact same way like I did of, oh, if they existed, we would have gotten it on camera somehow. But really what is significant there is after we had our experience in the same area a few months later, a mutual friend and their friend went out and they had almost something very similar happen without us having talked to each other, known each other, and shared the story with each other. They also had an experience where there was one person that two figures were watching and moving and staying and hiding behind, and then a second person off further away could see and was watching these two figures move in accordance with the first person.
Is that the person we were talking about earlier today?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There's been more that's happened in this area, and that's been kind of a nice confirmation, that this wasn't just nothing.
I told somebody who's got a big mouth and they blabbed it to a group of people one time. So then I was like known as that person. And so there's a handful of people who I was like, kind of like felt like I had to tell it. I didn't have to, but I felt like I had to. And I think I get, for the most part, people are like, I don't disbelieve you that you think you experienced that. And I don't find you to be generally lacking your mental faculties. So I don't think that whatever. So they were finding me to feel a credible human, but just a general disbelief. One friend who I told right away who was very excited and got me in touch with her brother, who is like never had an experience, but is way into this stuff. And he turned me on. He's the one who sent me a map of the area, because I told him the coordinate, and he sent me the map, and that's why we started drawing on this map. So a couple of supportive folks, my family, my kids, and my wife, I think, believe or want to believe me. My parents laugh at me. So
I've gotten a lot of the same type reactions from people, especially the one where I believe you saw something.
Yeah, there's nothing more condescending than that.
It's, again, one of those things. You have to experience it for yourself.
Exactly.
That's the only way. Whenever I had what I call my first sighting, the night before that, I had pebbles thrown at me with a group of people. We were all there together. And I mean, it wasn't a hallucination. The pebble actually hit the hood of a car and bounced up and hit me coming from the direction of the woods. And I mean, for the rest of the night and the better part of the next day, okay, well, I'm trying to rationalize that rock throwing incident, knowing that there's not animals that can throw rocks. And
right?
There was no way there was a person out there throwing these rocks. Absolutely no way. I know where I was, and there was nobody out there.
Yeah.
But still, it didn't matter. I wasn't convinced by a rock being thrown at me. It really takes, a sighting to really, throw you over that line.
I feel super lucky. I think that's one thing that's been out of this. I feel like it was I didn't ever hear it or think of it like you did about how we were kind of behaving like them, blending in. I've always just taken away this feeling that we were incredibly fortunate to tap into the ability to see or experiencing something that most people don't. And I don't know why. And I don't try to seek it out again. It's not the first time I've had some type of what probably most would call paranormal experiences. So I think there's some people I know who are like, oh yeah, of course you've had this happen, because I've had a couple of other experiences of my own. And I don't know, it's comforting to me that we got to experience that, because it's like confirmation that there is more than what we see, which we already know, but to have the opportunity to be able to have faith and experience that you had, right?
The experience of it being in your left ear.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
The synchronous movement, that really creeps me out. The mental image of that really creeps me out, even though I didn't see it. These things would have to have some sort of psychic bond to be able to do that. I mean, that's my train of thought here.
Absolutely. Or it would have to be like projecting itself.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
something's going on here.
It was unnatural first. The movement was absolutely unnatural, which is why I was like, that's not an elk. Like, I know how an elk moves, even when it's moving through a tight area of trees. Like, that's not it. And they don't have shoulders and a head and arms down to their thighs and stand 7 feet tall, separate bipedal beings, like.
and not to be sinister, but you were observing these two things creeping up towards Chris. What
I think my interpretation is they had no idea there was two of us, because of the way, or they thought there was two of us and didn't know there were three, because the way that we kind of organized our time, our positions, was Chris and I just basically alternated who sat in that spot and who was walking around, and our third friend walked off and left. So if they just didn't catch, I haven't gone that far into thinking about it, to be honest, but I think they were surprised to see me. And I feel like they picked up on whatever I put out, because my fear instinct as they moved towards Chris was to reach for my knife. And that is when they spun. Like they sensed me. And I think there was a get the hell out of Dodge. We've been spotted. That's how the whole thing seems to be.
How far from Chris were they whenever that happened?
That's a great question. So Chris, help me out here, because they were halfway between the clearing and you. So What is that, like 25 feet?
Yeah, like 25, 30.
Maybe 30 feet away? Yeah. Through some thick brush.
Blackberries? Is this blackberry thicket?
Yeah, but when are blackberries out?
Blackberries and like willow. And thick wild brush,
You can't walk through blackberries.
Oh, no, I've tried.
You will jack yourself up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we went out. When's the most recent time we went out there? Just like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, because we were talking about this, and it all looks very different and has grown up differently and all of that. But the area where I wanted to see a footprint, and the area where, it looked like they turned and disappeared, we had to practically army crawl to get to because of how thick it is. Now, it's been a long time, right? It's been 6 years.
And whenever you were observing the two, Chris, did you have any idea what was going on? Did you know they were there?
I kept sensing something behind me. I kept feeling, I kept hearing, I kept turning around, and that's what made Ken stand up and go look off to the side. I was trying to sit there and center myself and really come down and like process what had just happened. But I like could not, because it felt like every 30 seconds there was just something behind me. And I just kept turning around and trying to see and trying to look. And I didn't know anything was there, but I knew something was there.
It's so unique and interesting hearing you guys talk about this, because as I'm sure both of you know at this point, there is a huge division between people who believe flesh and blood and people who believe supernatural whenever it comes to these things.
Yeah.
And you guys experienced aspects of both.
I think
Yes.
so. Yeah.
Which is why I finally broke and wanted to talk about this. I was mostly the one that didn't want to speak about this really, but I wanted to add to the public record our account, because it is significant in the way that it is different. We experienced not just flesh and blood, but the unexplainable, the spiritual. And the other part of this is, you said sinister, but I want to point out, like, if they had wanted to do something to me while I was in that clearing, from that clearing to the outside of it in the woods, they could have done something. I was the rabbit at that point. I don't get the sense that they're sinister, because if they wanted to, they could have done something. They didn't. I believe they just wanted to be left alone. They just wanted to hunt. They just wanted to do what they were doing without a human interfering.
And then I surprised them.
That's a very good and important point to make. I agree with what you're saying. Sinister was definitely just a term that kind of popped in my head, because it's still trying to understand, what was their reason for approaching you or even letting you guys know they were there? We don't know.
No, I still just stick it to, I think that place was a perfect funnel for hunting, and we were just in their way. They wanted to hunt. They wanted to get dinner. And I felt pushed out more than anything. Chased out, I guess I should say, too.
We've talked about this too, the times that we've gone back to this area, this general area, or others that, feel squatchy, as you'll know, and think, is something ever going to happen again? Is that a once in a lifetime kind of thing? And we've talked about the fact that we are not seeking out more, but we do go to these places. And I think like we've left a couple gifts, when we've gone before, right? To just kind of put it out there that we're not, we don't have bad intentions in being in that space.
What have you left?
Food, apples.
Have you noticed any possible interaction or what you believe to be interaction?
No. I mean, we left, I left them at the places where, paths were blocked by X's. Anything could have enjoyed those apples. I thought if I got out there with the right intent, and if they were able to pick up on my fear when I grabbed a knife, maybe they'd pick up on my peace when I was in their space, and wishing them well. Which
is what a lot of people believe.
Yeah. Or maybe they'll never go back to that spot again. They got spotted.
You mentioned having had other paranormal experiences.
That's true.
That is an aspect that I'm kind of focused on, especially a lot in this podcast, is it seems like there are certain people out there, I would dare say the majority of people who experience something in this category of the unexplained, whether it be they have a Bigfoot sighting or they see a ghost or a UFO.
Yeah.
It tends to be the case that it's not just, oh, I just saw this and nothing else has ever happened in my life.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
I also have experienced things previous to this that, not in the woods, not in the wild. But I think I want to say it's my theory that there are people with their eyes open and with their senses, they are just more sensitive and can pay attention to what's happening in front of them and then not immediately push it down or push it away and say, oh, it was just an elk. Oh, that was just an airplane going by. Oh,
yeah.
I think that I think that there are just people with their eyes open.
I think too, humans don't use the full percentage of their brain, and I don't claim to use any more of mine than anybody else, but I might use a slightly different part. That's all I can think is the things that my other experiences are sensory based. And so I feel like, okay, so it's something about senses, right? It's something about a sensitivity or a receptivity to, I have no idea. Yeah.
Well, I mean, scientifically speaking, even though I hate to admit this one, especially to my wife and stepdaughter, women can see more colors than men, which is kind of weird to me, especially whenever I'm arguing with them about what color something is. But we also know that different people have, wider hearing ranges than other people.
Sure.
Younger people can hear more frequencies than older people, as our hearing gets less and less as we get older. But it stands to reason that same thing would apply to this sort of thing, that some people might be able to just sense things more than other people. And just like you're saying, being more receptive to these sort of things.
No, and detractors will say your mind is a powerful thing and you see what you want to see or need to see, right? I've had people say that to me too.
Absolutely. I was asked specifically to ask Chris about what you experienced in the desert.
Oh, in the desert. Yeah, that's pretty small compared to what I just told, so I'm not nervous. I went to the desert and it was something I was super excited about. It was a certified dark zone. It's you can look up and see the Milky Way. And it's especially awesome because there's these huge dunes you can walk up and really see just almost the whole horizon around you, as well as just the stars. So I went out by myself one night to just lay and just watch the stars, and it was gorgeous. I could sit there and see literally satellites going by, just slowly moving, and when there was an airplane going by, and then I noticed something that was moving not in a trajectory, not in a path. It almost looked like if someone had a cat laser pointer and was kind of moving it around in the air, and it would go this way and would immediately turn and go and make a triangle and go down and take a left and take a right, and just very erratic movements. And I sat there and watched that thing for the longest. And about the time that I was like, wow, I should maybe document this, and pulled out my phone and actually turned it on, it shot off and disappeared. So I have no other explanation for it than, it was a UFO or UAP as they call them these days, because they're there's nothing that I know of that moves like that, as far away as it was, and the bright yellow that it was of the light. There was nothing else that I know of. So
yeah, nothing that we know of can do that. So I'd say, yeah, that classifies for sure. I appreciate you guys sharing. I hope you guys don't disappear on me after we're done doing this episode.
I'm around.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, lots of information. In my opinion, this is a very important case involving Bigfoot. You guys have shared quite the story, quite the experience, and I'm very happy that you guys decided to come on my podcast and share it, because there are people listening that this will help immensely.
Good.
Especially those who have not only seen a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it, and seen something like what you're talking about. Because I would imagine that would be very difficult to come forward and say, because not only are you trying to explain to people that like you saw something that's not supposed to exist, but you saw it do something that it's not supposed to be able to do. And that would be a lot for anyone. So thank you very much for sharing your experience.
Thanks for taking us on sight unseen.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think that's one of the things when we were talking about doing this, because Chris has initiated this in terms of like involving me. I was like, well, why did you pick this podcast? And one of the things that Chris was saying is that, and I agree just from what I've heard, is you're not invoking sensationalism or judgment into it, and you're letting people tell their stories, and you're genuinely curious about it. And of course, we're all reaching out to your listeners by doing this, but we liked your vibe.
Yeah, it's great not to feel like I have to approach someone who's looking for a thrill, who's looking for just that next paranormal adrenaline rush, and that's how I want to approach the subject. That's not how I feel about the subject, and I appreciate that from you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And if you've had your own experience with something unexplained like Bigfoot, ghosts, or a UFO, send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. If you get a chance, check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find past episodes, links to social media, merchandise, everything you need, all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.